I saw this thing on the internet somewhere else that said, would you date yourself? And I thought, that's an interesting question to ask. And so, let's talk about that. And the first thing that I was thinking about was, to answer that question, yeah, I think I would, right? It would be great to meet somebody who has shared interests, right? I want to go to a gaming convention. She wants to go to a gaming convention too. I like playing MMOs. She likes playing MMOs. I want to go for a hike on the weekend or a spontaneous road trip. She'd want to do it too, right? Like I could go on and on and on. But meeting somebody who has the same interests as you, the same likes, the same worldview and perspective on things, well, that's totally cool, right? Like the more you can find somebody who has a similar perspective on life and a similar set of interests, the more likely you are to have that synergy, which is going to be excellent. That being said, though, I was thinking then maybe the bigger question would be, why wouldn't I, right? Like what are the deal breakers? Like what are the things that I would look at in somebody else and say, like, you know what, like this is not going to work out, right? And maybe those are things that I recognize because they have been things that were problems in my own life in the past. And the first one that came to my mind was having unresolved liabilities, maybe a lot of debt, maybe a relationship that is over, but you're still carrying the baggage from it because you haven't fully moved on a spiritual level. Those kinds of things. Maybe legal problems, if you have any kind of outstanding legal problems that you're carrying with you, like it could be a divorce that wasn't finalized. It could be toxic family that don't support what you're doing, and they tend to be a toxic, negative influence, right? That's really what it boils down to. External negative influences that put a storm cloud over the relationship. That is a huge red flag that it's important to get away from and resolve those things. Because when you have these kinds of, demons, if you will, that are haunting and plaguing you, then it's going to be very difficult for you to start something new because you haven't resolved the things which are old problems from the past. And when you have those things, they carry over, then they just are a toxin, right? And then they create ongoing problems, a drag on your relationship. And that's something that, I would not want to bring that into a relationship, and I wouldn't want to be in a relationship that brings that into my life. Like you can't think about what are we going to do in the future when you can't actually move beyond the past. So there's that. And another thing that I thought of is, really kind of a deal breaker would be being extremely physically unfit. And that's not to say that it's all about looks. But if you're the person who drives around and around the parking lot several times because you are determined to find a parking spot that's 1 or 2 car lengths closer to the front door because the thought of walking is just abhorrent to you. If you're that kind of a person that doesn't feel like being a good steward of your body or being active appeals to you, well, it kind of ties in with slobbiness. It's that tendency to not look at life from the perspective of activity and stewardship. And if you're that kind of a person, that's a major problem, because you can't have an active desire to participate in the world and then be paired up with somebody who has no desire to be active at all, or someone who doesn't have any interest in being a good steward of the things in their life. And when I say fitness, I think that applies to probably, are you, extremely obese and not taking care of yourself? That's one type of fitness. But then another kind of fitness would be, how do you keep your home? And I'm not saying, just like I wouldn't say that someone needs to be physically in perfect, physical condition. Like, you don't have to be, like a magazine, cover model or something, but you need to take care of yourself within reason. Just like, you don't need to be a person who's extremely obsessed with outward appearances, but you should wash yourself and wear clean clothes. You don't have to have a home that looks like it's, some sort of immaculate showroom kind of situation. I think that would be obnoxious. But you don't want to have a house which is completely, looks like an animal lives in there. And if that's where you're at, then you need to figure out how to be a good steward of your life before you think about having, another person share their life with you. Another thing I was thinking about is, sense of humor, right? And I'm not necessarily talking about something as simple as cracking jokes. I'm saying to be able to not take life so seriously that you can't just engage in fun banter with other people. I find myself enjoying long conversations with folks. Sometimes they're just acquaintances. Sometimes maybe it's an old friend, but those conversations where you start talking about something for 5 minutes and then a 5 minutes of hello turns into an hour or two of just BSing about all kinds of random stuff. And it feels just kind of therapeutic and positive, and if you're a person who can't be a conversationalist, a person who's maybe too busy all the time to feel like they have room for small unimportant conversations. If you're too closed off to share meaningful details about your life because you think you're too important, or you're too focused on, business or something to stop and just have a conversation without any particular objective attached to it. These are things which I think really, matter. You've got to enjoy talking about things and talking to people about random things, and you've got to have a open-ended attitude toward life that it's not, not everything has to have some sort of business purpose attached to it. I guess that could be summed up really with authenticity. If you're not an authentic person, and the things that you say always have a subset of some kind of agenda in their undertone, if you are a person who is always measuring yourself up against other people, and conversations you have always have that undertone, or if you have, a lot of things that you think are, beneath you or something, and you just you don't connect well with others in just sort of a casual way, well, a lot of the best things that happen in life are random encounters that aren't necessarily scripted or planned. And I think, authenticity is super important. Maybe a good example of maybe that in action would be something like Southern hospitality. We talk about, people that just, they're by nature, they're welcoming. By nature, they're positive. By nature, they can always have a good conversation with a neighbor. To be able to be serious, but not take yourself too seriously. Those kinds of things are important. Another deal breaker, not being a moderate. It seems like a lot of people, they fall into some kind of a rabbit hole of some political thing or some ideological thing or a religious thing or something, right? Like everybody's got something that they think is the most important thing in the world, and everybody had better fall in line. And if people don't agree with whatever their thing is, then they will exclude and discard those people conversationally and personally, because it's all about agreement on the important issues to them. You can't have communion with that kind of an attitude. That's why I've talked about how I like to go to church, but I couldn't actually connect with people who are church-going Christians. Why? Just because they have their belief system and it's rigid, and they judge anyone who doesn't have the same belief system, because their belief system is fundamentally about judging other people. And so even if I like the message, I can't immerse myself in that. I couldn't have a relationship with somebody who has or harbors that kind of exclusionary attitude toward other people. It's very important to have a character where you aren't too sure that you are right about everything. Humility, it matters. And finally, I think the last thing, and that's really kind of the puzzle piece I've been working on in my personal life, it's reaching a place which is home, reaching a place where you intend to stay. Now, I'm not saying I'm never going to move again. I'm not saying that I'm intending to stay in some sort of a perpetual stasis and freeze my life in this specific spot forever. That's not the point I'm getting at. The point I'm getting at is you have to be at a place where you're not looking to move on, where you're not looking to escape. You have to reach a place where you're not of a mind, I need to get out of here. I need to move on. I need to find the next thing to do. Because if you're not satisfied and you're not at peace with the place where you are, then how are you going to make the type of connections which require stability and constancy and commitment? You really can't make a lot of friends at the airport. Very easily, maybe you can kind of stay in touch with somebody you meet there, but the point is, when everyone is going in their own direction, then you're just a few ships crossing in the night, and it doesn't matter how much you could have in common when you're building on a foundation which is determined to move on. At some point, it just isn't going to work out, because the desire to follow new paths is going to override the willingness to stay where you are. So you've got to get to a place where you want to stay in terms of your worldview, in terms of your outlook on life, in terms of your geography, so that you can build meaningful connections and relationships, and you aren't always keeping your bag packed in the closet because you never know when you're going to hit the road again. It's great to be open to being a wanderer, but it's also important to reach a place you can call home. That's one reason why when I play games like Valheim, I love them. They're amazing games, but I don't really play them very much because they're all about being alone in a solitary world, doing your thing. And life, while it can benefit vastly from solitude, is not just about being perpetually alone. There is a point when you have to be open. You have to realize that the key to a life well lived is also about not being in a silo, not being an island. And that's a place where you have to get to. You have to get to the point where you are ready to be open with others. And if you aren't at that point, then it doesn't matter how much you go through the motions of acting like you want connections. You really don't want connections because you really haven't reached a place of being at peace with yourself. So in a nutshell, like, these are all things, like, I've worked through these things, you know, like, am I a perfect person? No, but no one is. And I would never expect others to be either. But those are kind of the big rocks. And I think if you kind of master those things, those are the type of character traits that add up to the secret sauce of a good relationship. It's not to even say that it's, you know, it's not really even about specific things, I guess, that make, you know, make a person a good fit or a bad fit in terms of relationships. It's just, it's those character traits. Like, you got to be at peace with yourself, and you've got to reach a place where you have found a place in life that you feel is home. And when you reach that place of serenity internally, then you can share that with someone else. And it isn't necessarily going to be someone that looks just like me. It's not going to be someone who has those exact same interests as me. It's actually been said that sometimes maybe relationships work out better if people are actually quite different, because their differences complement each other. So when we say find someone who's like-minded, find someone who has the same sort of attitudes in life and things like that, you know, it's not really about those things I talked about at the very beginning of this video. It's not about finding, you know, the woman who's gonna like everything I like and be into all of my hobbies and stuff. Like, yeah, there should be some crossover, obviously, but it's not about those things. It's about those fundamental character things that make a person compatible or wind up pushing people apart. And I think when I look at my life, the reason why I would say, yeah, I would date someone like myself, well, it has nothing to do with my interests. It has nothing to do with my looks. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that I have gotten to a place in my life where I don't really feel like I have contradictions or demons or baggage that I'm carrying from the past, or attitudes that are limiting in nature or anything like that. So being able to lay aside those weights that I have carried in the past, it puts me in a place where I think probably there's nothing that would make me feel like I have any of those big red flags. That doesn't mean that I don't look at my life every day and say, well, you know, there's things I could do better or be better. And that's true for your whole life. Every time you look at your past self, whether it's the version of you that was there yesterday or the version of you that was there 10 years ago, you're always going to look at yourself, if you're an honest, healthy person, and realize, you know what, I have some wisdom, some perspectives on life that I have gained from my most recent experiences, which I didn't have before, and I'm grateful for that. But I do believe you can get some of the big rocks settled so that you aren't a broken person, even if you are perhaps, or definitely not, a perfect one. We don't have to be perfect to be good, but you can get to a place in life where you can truly believe in your heart that you are a good person, and you can also surround yourself with other people who you can honestly say the same about. That's really what it all boils down to. And when we're in the company of others who are good people, well, as I think Warren Buffett said, surround yourself with people who are better than you, and then you will drift in their direction. As always, best of luck on your adventure. Till next time. Thanks for watching.